Now more than ever, super rich are planning to leave the country. The golden geese are flying the coop because they realize their country just doesn't give them what they need anymore. And today we have more proof. Here's an article written by Mark O'Neill, who says, alarmed at the slowing economy, fear of higher taxes on income and profits, and the increasing dominance of the state sector, thousands of super rich want to leave the country. A research report shows that 10,000 high net worth individuals wanted to leave in 2022 alone, taking $48 billion with them. These are the folks that have money. They're tired of the government putting them under the microscope, wanting to audit them, thinking they're unethical just because they're wealthy, wanting them to pay more just because the government squandered what they've already paid. And now they're finally being pushed to say, we don't want to be here. Mark O'Neill continues, these are people classified with assets from $1 million to $30 million, so-called high net worth and very high net worth individuals. In June, the CEO of a gaming company announced that he and his family would leave. I'm preparing my family to move abroad next year. I'm prioritizing both my family and the business, saying that conditions living in the country just aren't what they once were. There's safety concerns, there's financial concerns. It's harder to run his business. Now, he did not give detailed reasons beyond that for the decision. However, other founders, some of the richest businessmen, have been quietly living overseas. Several factors, it says, are pushing the wealthy out of their homeland. One of the objectives is the idea of wealth sharing, a signature policy of the government. They said earlier that efforts should be made to expand the middle income group, increase the incomes of lower income groups, and rationally adjust higher incomes in order to enhance social fairness and justice. This can only mean one thing for the super rich: higher taxes on their income, company profits and assets, or so-called voluntary contributions to the state. Another factor, the article continues, talks about the experience of living through the COVID policies for 3 years, talking about how the government could use its enormous power to intervene in people's lives and restrict their freedoms, and saying it could use this power again. Now here's the thing. Mark O'Neill wrote this article for a website called EGI Insight. And what I left out was that this article was written about how many of China's super rich plan to leave the country. People in China are tired of high taxes. The CEO of a gaming company is Huang Yimeng. It talks about Jack Ma moving to Tokyo, and it talks about China's zero COVID policy, along with the idea of common prosperity being promoted in China. The reality is, that article could have just as well been written with a little bit different points about the country where you live. The idea of common prosperity, shared prosperity, is not exactly a foreign concept to Joe Biden or Justin Trudeau or the new administration in Germany or Australia or many countries around the world. The Western world has taken a shift to the left. The idea, which is very much in line with Generation Z thinking, that we want socialism, we don't want to pay for it, why don't you pay? And it's funny that I go on social media and I see memes about how South America, most South American countries in the last few years have shifted from being run by right-leaning administrations to now being run by left-leaning administrations. People say, oh my goodness, South America, how terrible. And yet the Western world, the so-called international community, the United States and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and some countries in Europe, really aren't any different. This article could have been written about the United States. And it's true that tens of thousands of Americans and Canadians and Australians have moved overseas in recent years due to what they believe are attacks on their personal freedom, due to their increasing business and investment portfolios and the belief that they're paying too much in tax, in many cases while others pay not enough or nothing at all while they get told how they're still not paying enough even though they pay close to half. These things are happening. We've worked with hundreds of folks in just the last year who feel exactly that way. And you're seeing millionaire migration patterns. Yes, some Americans are moving from New York to Miami. They're moving from Seattle to Austin. And yet I've always said, if you're gonna move, you might as well move. Adjusting to a new life in Austin is really not much easier than adjusting to a new life in Dublin or Singapore or Belize or Kuala Lumpur or any other place where they speak English. At least we can say if you want someone to speak English, that's fine. You can find more personal freedom. You can keep more of your money in many of those places. Whether you want to move to Switzerland or whether you move to Nicaragua, we've helped people do both because they believe they're not getting a fair deal. And it's not just in China. And you know what's changed in my lifetime and in your lifetime is the fact that you wouldn't think this applied to your country 20 years ago. So many of the people that we've worked with have said, I enjoyed watching you. Some people have said, as my friend called it, you were kind of a romance novel for men. I just enjoyed the fantasy that maybe I could live in some other country, and holy cow, the last 3 years, the last 5 years, the last 10 years, I've seen my countries becoming more like that country we used to say, oh my goodness, they're communist, they're Marxist-Leninist, as this article says. Oh, are our politicians really that much different? In some cases, they're a little different. And yet, why is it Americans are moving not only to other states, but in record numbers to other countries? You see people moving to places like Ecuador, for example, to stretch their Social Security checks. They may not be millionaires, but they realize we can't even make it in our own country. And so they're going where they're treated best. And they're going to places where $1,500 or $2,000 or $3,000 a month really goes a long way. They can have a good life because the country doesn't care about them. On the other end of the spectrum, you're seeing people like myself who are like, I'm not getting my money's worth here. Maybe I don't fit in here. The culture's changing. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel free. I just don't get a good vibe. There's got to be a place where I can go and be happier. And you've seen countless people, influencers now, talking about how they moved to Dubai, they moved to Zurich, they moved to countless places, and they're happier and they're growing their business faster. That's the part that's scary. And it's hard for people from the West to admit, because in the back of our mind we still have, well, but it wasn't that long ago. We have to accept the way things are today. The way things are today is you've got a handful of countries that were communist in your lifetime that now have more economic freedom on a quantitative level than the United States. The United States keeps falling down the rankings and other countries keep going up. Now we can say, well, maybe it'll come back, but what evidence do you have that it will come back? Politicians are continuing to take things in all these countries in the wrong direction. They're not going to turn on a dime. The culture, the body politic is certainly not going to change on a dime. They're not going to suddenly start agreeing with you that somehow capitalism is great again. And yes, we love people who make money. I saw a quote by Thomas Sowell who said, I'm so old that I can remember when other people's achievements were considered to be an inspiration rather than a grievance. And there are countries where that is still somewhat the case, if not entirely the case, much more so than where you're living. But where you're living, that time is past until there is a reckoning and a rebirth. Alcoholics have to hit rock bottom before they decide to change, and I believe so do countries. You're going down a path that's more and more left-leaning, more and more confiscatory of wealth, more and more against the cultural norms that perhaps you want, or just the fact that people don't accept you because you run a business and you're just a greedy pig. How dare you take people's labor and profit from it? How dare you rent people an apartment and retire from it? You're a greedy pig. That's not going to change. But it already is changed in other places where you can go and be respected. So are you going to listen to that voice in the back of your head that said, no, this is America and we're always going to be great no matter what, just because I don't know why? Or you're going to realize that every empire rises and falls, and the time for falling, the time for going against the norms that you believe in is now. Because this article could be about China or the United States or Canada. Probably means being a citizen of another country, being able to live in another country, being able to pay taxes somewhere where they take less of your money. Those are all good things. Maybe having some of your money in a country where 3 banks don't fail in a week. Good things to put together. It's what Nomad Capitalist does for folks who have high and very high and ultra high net worths. And it's something that I've personally done. And I tell you about this because I'm glad that I'm reading this from this side of the table. And if you're on the other side of the table, I think it's worth getting prepared before you look at it and say, I wish I would have done that 3, 5, or 10 years ago.